the unblinking eye. Sarah Jensen had always considered herself pragmatic, even a little cynical. A graphic designer by trade, she dealt in the tangible pixels, vectors, the stark lines of a well-crafted logo. Her life in the bustling, anonymous sprawl of London, Ontario felt safe, predictable. She pulled back the blinds, scanned the street below, the apartment building across the way. Nothing, just the everyday bustle of the city, oblivious. But the feeling remained. Her routines, once a source of comfort, now felt like a vulnerability. Her morning jogs in the park, her weekly trip to the farmer's market, her late-night walks with her friend Emily, each activity felt exposed, every movement charted. She found herself subconsciously altering her routes, changing her timings, a subconscious primal response to a threat she couldn't see. One Tuesday, after a late client meeting, she returned home around 10 p.m. As she unlocked her apartment door, she noticed it. A single red rose lay on her doormat. Its petals were flawless, still glistening with dew as if plucked moments ago. A note was tucked into its stem, "For your beauty." Sarah felt a surge of nausea. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't quirky. This was something far more sinister. She scooped up the rose with a tissue, dropped it into a plastic bag, and then stuffed it into the nearest public bin, as if disposing of toxic waste. She cleaned her doormat obsessively, scrubbing away any trace of the object. Her sanctuary no longer felt safe. It felt breached. She tried to rationalize it. An admirer, perhaps, misguided but harmless. She hadn't dated much since her last serious relationship ended, and maybe some forgotten interaction had been misconstrued. But the cold certainty that it was more than that it was calculated, settled deep in her gut. She called the police, a hesitant, almost embarrassed call. Officer David Miller arrived, a young, earnest man who patiently listened to her story. He took down details, frowned at the lack of direct threats, and offered polite, generic advice. "Be more vigilant, Ms. Jensen. Lock your doors. Report anything concrete." He left her with a sense of dismissal, a clear implication that she was overreacting to a harmless, albeit creepy, admirer. He didn't see the silent terror that was already gnawing at her. The stalker didn't escalate to direct threats, which was somehow more unnerving. Instead, the boundary between her public and private life began to dissolve. The notes became more personal, more detailed. "Your new client's logo sketch is very strong. Good use of negative space." This note, found on her kitchen counter, tucked beneath the cereal box, the morning after she'd worked on a new design, something no one outside her immediate team knew about. "That blue dress suits you. Very elegant." She lived on the second floor of a quiet, tree-lined street, her apartment a sanctuary of minimalist design and comforting routine. She brewed Earl Grey tea every morning, worked from home 3 days a week, and spent her evenings lost in digital art or the occasional indie film. This note slipped into her mail slot after she'd worn a specific dress to a friend's birthday party. The precision, the impossible knowledge of her movements, her thoughts, her life was chilling. It meant someone was watching, always, and not just from afar. Someone had access to her building, perhaps even her apartment. She changed her locks, not just the deadbolt, but the entire mechanism, hiring a locksmith who assured her it was top of the line. She bought a chain lock, a door wedge. She installed a peephole camera, linking it to her phone. She purchased a small, motion-activated alarm for her windows. Every click, every new security measure was a desperate, futile attempt to regain control. The feeling of being watched intensified to the point of suffocating paranoia. She felt eyes on her from across the street, from parked cars, from the shadows of alleyways. Every stranger became a suspect, every averted glance a confirmation. She began to see fleeting shadow figures in her peripheral vision, a tall, gaunt shape disappearing around a corner, a flicker of movement behind a curtain in the building opposite. She'd spin around, her heart pounding, only to find empty space, cold and still. Her sleep became a torment. She'd drift off, only to be jolted awake by the faintest of sounds, a creak of floorboards, a whisper of wind, the distant wail of a siren, her mind interpreting them as an imminent breach. She dreamt of being pursued, of eyes watching her from the darkness, of hands reaching out, not to harm, but to touch, to claim. She'd wake up screaming, her body aching, convinced she heard footsteps just outside her door, convinced she felt a cold breath on her neck. She began to withdraw. She stopped jogging in the park. She ordered groceries online. She made excuses to avoid social gatherings. The thought of being outside, exposed, unbearable. Emily, her best friend, tried to intervene. "Sarah, you're not yourself. You're jumpy. You're not sleeping. This stalker, whoever it is, they're getting to you. You need to come stay with me." Eleanor, her voice tight with unshed tears, tried to explain. "It's not just getting to me, Em. It's everywhere. It knows everything. It feels like it's inside my head." Emily listened patiently, her face etched with worry, but her words, though kind, were dismissive. "Sarah, your mind is playing tricks on you. This is stress. You need help." Her gentle suggestion of therapy only isolated Sarah further. No one would believe her. She was alone, truly, terribly alone. She wasn't one for drama or for the kind of gothic narratives that seemed to plague true crime podcasts. Her fears were practical: missed deadlines, client dissatisfaction, the rising cost of rent. She was wrong. The stalker didn't try to break in, which was somehow more insidious. Instead, it played with her. At night, she'd hear it. A series of soft, rhythmic taps on her window pane, moving from one window to the next, like a morbid game of follow the leaders. Sometimes, a soft, melancholy hum would emanate from outside her door, a tune she almost recognized but couldn't quite place, mournful and chillingly beautiful. It was a perverse display of its capabilities, a cruel reminder that it was out there, capable of anything. She'd stand by the darkened windows, her phone flashlight trembling in her hands, trying to discern a shape, a shadow, anything. But there was never anything. Just the sounds echoing in the vast silence of her apartment, slowly, inexorably driving her mad. One particularly cold night, the tapping on her bedroom window started again. Sarah crept silently, heart pounding, and peered through a tiny gap in the blinds. The night was moonless, pitch black. She saw nothing. But the tapping continued, persistent, rhythmic. It became a soft, scratching, insistent, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging across glass. And then a low, wet whisper seemed to glide along the pane, right where she was looking. "I see you, Sarah, always. I'm here with you." It was a voice she didn't recognize, deep and gravelly, yet with an unnerving, almost yearning quality. It sent shivers down her spine. Her logical mind screamed at her to turn on the lights, to confront it, to prove it was just a trick of her mind. But a deeper, primal fear rooted her to the spot. She pressed herself against the wall, sliding down to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees, trying to make herself invisible. The whispers continued, now blending into a soft, guttural chuckle followed by a series of strange, soft clicking sounds like teeth chattering in the cold. It was mocking her, enjoying her terror. Her paranoia consumed her. Every creak of her old building became a footstep. Every distant siren, a sign that it was coming for her. She began to suspect everyone. The new delivery driver who always seemed to linger a moment too long. The elderly woman across the hall who always watched her leave. Officer Miller's dismissive glance. Were they involved? Were they helping it? Or were they just as much its victims, oblivious to the terror that walked among them? She tried to leave, packed a small bag, her hands shaking, her phone in her pocket, ready to call Emily. But as she unlocked her apartment door, she saw it. The first hint of something amiss wasn't a grand, terrifying gesture, but a subtle shift in the everyday. It began with the mail. It started subtly, as these things always do, like a barely perceptible tremor in the familiar melody of her life. Tucked into the small space between her doorframe and the secure, newly installed deadbolt was another note. "Leaving so soon, Sarah? Our game is just beginning." Her blood ran cold. She slammed the door shut, fumbling with the locks. It knew it was always one step ahead. It was watching her plans. It was inside. She retreated deeper into her apartment, a prisoner in her own home. She unplugged her phone, covered her webcam, drew every blind. She sat in the darkest corner of her living room, clutching a heavy iron poker from her decorative fireplace, her eyes wide, staring at nothing, listening to everything. And then it began to speak, not just whispers from the walls, not just distorted echoes. It was a clear voice, seemingly coming from all around her, resonating within the very air of her apartment. "You like your tea with one sugar, Sarah, and you leave your bedroom light on when you're afraid." It knew. It knew intimate details, things only someone who had spent hours, days, perhaps weeks observing her from within the very confines of her home would know. It wasn't just watching from the street, it had been inside. "I watch you sleep, Sarah," the voice continued, its tone soft, almost affectionate, yet utterly chilling. "Your breath so quiet, your dreams so restless." A wave of nausea washed over her. She scrambled to her feet, shining her flashlight frantically around the room, into every shadow, behind every piece of furniture. Nothing. The room was empty, but the voice was everywhere. "You try to hide, but there is nowhere to hide from me. I am the silence between your thoughts, the shadow in your reflection." She heard it then, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from within the walls of her bedroom, slowly, deliberately, as if something was making its way through the plaster, through the very structure of the building. And then a subtle shift in the wallpaper, a faint, almost imperceptible bulging, a rippling, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. Sarah stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat. She stared at the wall, mesmerized by a growing dread. The bulge moved slowly, inches at a time, creeping towards the center of the wall. And then a sound, a soft, wet tearing, like fabric ripping, but deeper, more organic. A single dark crack appeared in the wallpaper, then another, spreading like spider webs. A flyer for a local pizza place slipped under her door. Even though her building had a secure mail slot, she dismissed it as a delivery person's laziness. Then, a few days later, a magazine she didn't subscribe to, its glossy pages slightly creased, left on her doorstep. And from the center of the spreading cracks, a small dark hole began to form. And through that hole, in the oppressive darkness, she saw it. A single, unblinking eye, not human, too large, too dark, almost black, and reflecting the dim light of her apartment with an unnerving, hungry gleam. It wasn't a human eye. It was ancient, primitive, predatory. A primal scream tore from Sarah's throat, a sound of pure terror and defiance that ripped through the quiet of her apartment. She swung the iron poker blindly, frantically, at the wall, at the eye. The impact sent a jarring shock up her arm, the sound of splintering wood and crumbling plaster echoing in the small room. The eye vanished, the bulge receded. The cracks remained like a permanent scar. The whispers in the room coalesced, forming a single, multi-tonal voice, resonating with a cold, absolute authority. "You hurt me, Sarah, but I am still here, always here. Inside." The voice faded, leaving behind an oppressive, cold silence. The apartment was still, perfectly still. But the air felt heavy, charged with an invisible presence, a pervasive coldness that seeped into her bones. The wall where the eye had been was a gaping, jagged hole, revealing the dark, hollow space within. Sarah didn't remember much after that. She must have called the police, or Emily. She was found later that morning, huddled in the corner of her apartment, catatonic, the iron poker still clutched in her hand. The police investigated, found the damaged wall, the broken plaster, but dismissed it as a stressed woman's desperate act, an attempt to find some tangible enemy in her fear. They found no evidence of a break-in, no specific culprit. She was quietly moved from her apartment, referred for psychiatric evaluation. They diagnosed her with severe stress, induced psychosis, paranoia, and dissociative episodes. They put her on medication therapy. They tried to fix her. She lives in a small, new apartment now, in a modern building, far from old walls, far from any profound silence. She never leaves the television off, always a low hum of white noise to drown out the others. She checks her reflection endlessly, scrutinizing her own face, half expecting it to distort, to show the void. She hires cleaners, never letting anyone truly alone in her space. She changes her locks regularly, compulsively. She tossed it, annoyed by the clutter, but the subtle oddities persisted, escalating with an insidious grace. Then came the notes. Small, anonymous slips of paper folded neatly, placed in the most mundane of locations, tucked into her windshield wiper after a grocery run. She tells herself it was a breakdown, hallucinations, the sheer exhaustion of being hunted, the pressure of paranoia finally catching up to her. She repeats it like a mantra, a fragile shield against the terrifying truth. She clings to logic, to reason, but the shield is riddled with holes. From that day, she still remains thinking about it. She feels the faint, inexplicable cold spots, even in the warmth of summer. She sometimes catches the cloying, sweet scent of lilies and ozone on a breeze or in the stillness of the night. She hears faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing, calling her name, promising her oblivion, echoing her deepest fears, the secrets of her life. She scrutinizes the faces of strangers, the expressions of friends, looking for that subtle distortion, that unnatural stretch of a smile, that emptiness in the eyes, that faint, unblinking intensity in the depths of their gaze. She knows it's still there, inside the walls, within the silence, watching, and she knows with a horrifying certainty that it carried a piece of her with it, a resonance that was forever altered, forever open to its cold, unblinking gaze. She escaped the apartment, but she did not escape the stalker. She is safe, for now, but she is not whole. She is forever haunted by the chilling knowledge that beneath the familiar surfaces of our lives, ancient, hungry things lie dormant, or perhaps actively pursue, waiting for the curious, waiting for the isolated, waiting for the fear, forever ensuring that some absences once experienced can never truly be filled. And she will always wonder what it now watches, what secrets it now collects, and if, one day, it will break through the very fabric of her sanity and reach for her again. Left on the bench at her favorite park, stuck to her apartment door with a piece of tape. They were innocuous at first. Nice day for a walk. Hope you found what you were looking for. Earl Grey is a good choice. That last one, about the Earl Grey, sent a shiver down her spine. No one knew her tea preference except her closest friends, and they never came over unannounced. A fleeting thought, a coincidence, a random observation, but the hair on her arms pricked. The mundane began to feel menacing. She told herself it was a harmless prank, a quirky neighbor. She was a city dweller. She was used to eccentricities, but the feeling of being watched began to take root. It was a cold, tangible presence, not just a vague unease. She'd be at her desk, working, and suddenly the feeling would wash over her, eyes on her, a persistent, unblinking gaze. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.